أهلا بكم. التصوير الضوئي هو أحد أهم الفنون البصرية في وقتنا الحاضر، وهو أحد الفنون التي تعرف البشر على بعضهم البعض، على عاداتهم وتقاليدهم وتراثهم وموروثهم أيضا. لكل فنان رؤيته ومصدر إلهامه. رؤية الفنان والمصور الأمريكي دان وينتيرز نتعرف عليها اليوم في ضيف الشارقة. أهلا بكم مجددا. إذا نرحب بضيفي وضيف الشارقة السيد دان وينتيرز، المصور الصحفي والمصور الفوتوغرافي. Welcome to Sharjah, Mr. Dan Winters. Welcome to our show. And speaking of being here in Sharjah, to what extent do you consider being here in Sharjah inspiring due to exposed to other cultures different from yours?
Well, for many years, about almost 40 years, I've been a photographer, and I've traveled all over the world. And this is my second time in the region. I've been to Kuwait and Iraq, and one of my great loves with my job is that I get to experience other cultures. Yeah, it's one of my great loves.
And that's important for any photographer. What was the experience like being in Sharjah at exposure with or in a company of many photographers from around the world?
What's interesting about being a photographer is that we have a very lonely life. We work by ourselves with a couple other people. We don't work with other photographers. So when we come to a festival like this, and there are so many photographers, I know of many of the photographers because I've seen their work in magazines, but I'd never met them. So one of the wonderful things about coming here is that we get to meet one another and look at one another's work and meet one another and talk ideas and talk about photography. So that's been a really amazing experience for me.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing experience for all photographers. Can you take us back to the beginning and tell us more where your inspiration came from and who inspired you?
In the very beginning, I started taking pictures because I was trying to make little movies, and the quality of my movies was terrible. And because a movie is a photograph or a bunch of photographs, I thought, well, if I learn photography, my movie quality will be better. And I would do this with my friends when I was like 12 years old, and started trying to learn how to make proper exposures. And so the photography started there. I was mostly interested in movies up until I was about 16 or 17 years old. And I started doing more and more photography, and was early in my career. I was inspired by the great early photographers, Alfred Stieglitz, Edward Steichen, Ansel Adams, Harry Callahan, these men that in the turn of the century, and Edward Weston, you know, through the beginning of the 20th century. And I would study their work and learn from that work. And the more you learn, obviously, the more you realize you don't know, but you want to pursue more knowledge. So it's always been a part. I still do to this day. I try as hard as I can to obtain more and more knowledge.
But you chose still images over moving images. Why?
Well, so that's partially true. I do mostly do still images, but I do a lot of music videos and commercials and short films still to this day. So I work in film also.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, to go into different experiences in art, but in photography, you focused on portraits. Why?
I like people.
Yeah?
Yeah, I like people a lot. And I find everyone has an interesting story. if they open themselves up to sharing their story. And that's inspirational to me. And as my career has advanced and progressed, I've met many very interesting people, and I love to have a dialogue with those people. So portraits to me are very interesting to make.
What motivates you today? What makes you pick up a camera and take photos?
I think I started to understand that after doing it for so long, I have a very large body of work. And when I shoot now, I think about how this image will fit into the body of work. So if it's something that I want to document, but I don't really have a use for it, a lot of times I'll just use my phone, take some pictures, you know, to have for myself. But I'm motivated, I think, mostly by a love of photography. I love photography, yeah.
You are known for building your own sets for portraits. How do you convey the story behind this character or this person, like in one set or in one photo?
Well, I think that every person possesses the entire range of human emotion, whether it's joy or sadness, deep thought, laughter. I like to photograph people in a kind of a quiet space, because I think that people can connect with the person if it's like we slow down and we get quiet. So it's very difficult to make one photograph that really conveys all of that. So I just pick kind of a piece of that, you know. There was a photographer who lived he died in the 1940s, but his name was Alfred Stieglitz, and he believed that one single photograph could not convey everything there was about a person. And so he started doing what he called the extended portrait, so that it was many photographs. And when you viewed all the photographs, you got a better sense of the person. We don't always have the luxury of doing that. You know, oftentimes we need just one picture for a magazine or for an article. So I try to stay in the place I think that I feel most comfortable, which is kind of a quiet, pensive space, and try to depict the characters, the vulnerability sometimes of the person, you know.
What about feeling connected to the photos or making your viewers feel connected to the photo? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's really the trick, you know. It's really the trick to create an image that people can relate to and connect to. I think I have a gift for talking to my subjects and talking them through the photo shoot and directing them. And I think that's a big part of it, because I have an idea in my head of the kind of picture I want to take. And so if I talk to them very gently while I'm shooting and get them into that place to create a photograph that people can connect to, that's really a part of the goal of a portrait photographer.
There are some experiences that I would like to talk about. You photographed two presidents of the United States of America, George Bush and Barack Obama. How was this experience?
So I photographed Obama two times. Once in 2008 and then once in 2016. And the thing I found most fascinating about that is how much in 8 years, how much he aged, and how much it took from his body, you know, being president for 8 years. It's kind of amazing. After the first time I photographed him, that was for Time magazine cover, the first photograph. And then I photographed him again for New York magazine. And Obama is a very fun person, you know. He's like, all right, what do you want? You know, what are we going to do? You know, he's very fun. He says hello to all the crew, you know. he's just a very kind person. And the problem with photographing presidents is you don't get very much time. So for Obama, the first time, 20 minutes, which is fine because I'm there hours before getting my lights ready and getting everything ready. And then the second time, 10 minutes. But it was no problem because I had plenty of people. I had all the equipment. I think we lit everything for like 6 hours beforehand. So when he got there, we just went right to work and went setup to setup to setup. And he's really fun to work with. I really like him. You know, you'll do an interesting angle, and he'll say like, "Oh, we're getting artsy now," you know. And then Bush he's a funny guy. You know, Bush is that guy that people connected to him because he seems like just a normal guy. You know, they both do to me, but. I remember something very funny that Bush did. I did the first shot of him, which is a tight photograph, and then we did a shot of him in the field. And
I saw that.
You saw that one?
Yeah.
So when we did the tight shot, I finished and I said, okay, I need 10 minutes to reset the lights. We had hours with him. It wasn't a hurry. We weren't hurrying. I need to reset for a wide shot. And he said, Dan Winters, you're a great American. Which I thought was so funny because it was just out of the blue, you know. But yeah, it was amazing. And when I do those shoots, I know that there's a historical aspect to it.
Yeah,
and
you realized that.
I realized it at the time. Yeah, and I tell my crew before the shoot, you know, let's look at this time and place right now that we're in the history of the world, and just accept that we're involved in some little way of like documenting history. To acknowledge it is important for me, you know, to acknowledge it and be grateful.
The second one is the iconic photo of Angelina Jolie with dozens of bees over her face and body. And this photo is amazing. And this experience is unique. Tell us more about this experience.
Well, it was one of the most difficult shoots, I think, of my career because it required so much preparation. I raise bees myself. I started raising bees when I was 9 years old, and I have bees at my studio. And one of the reasons that National Geographic called me is because they knew that I knew about bees. And so this was for a story about Angelina starting an initiative, a worldwide initiative with UNESCO to train women beekeepers. And so I talked to her on the phone, and we came up with this idea of having bees on her. And so we went to great preparation to make sure she wouldn't get stung. And by doing that, what we did was there's a specific kind of honeybee. It's an Italian bee.
I heard about it.
You know about this. They're very gentle, these bees. And we put, the queens have a certain smell, queen pheromone. And we got some queen pheromone from a scientist at University of California at Davis. And so I put this stuff on her.
Oh, this is so smart.
Yeah, and so we put the bees in a ball on this piece of wood right in here. And as soon as we put them down, they just started crawling all over her because they thought there was a queen.
Yeah.
And so they went on her face and wherever I put this stuff, you know. And the big problem we had was too many bees were going on her, and it started to look scary. The idea she and I had was we wanted it to look like jewelry, not like scary or repulsive, right? So we ended up having to take bees off with a brush the whole time when we were shooting, and I thought we got it to a good balance. She stood there perfectly still for 18 minutes. It took 18 minutes to make the picture. And she never got stung. She got stung one time as she was walking back to hair and makeup because one of them went in her boot. She had boots on. And one of them went in her boot and stung her leg. But while we were shooting, there was no incident at all. And all of the crew wore bee suits. And I didn't wear a bee suit because I wanted to be in solidarity with her. You know, here we are, we're both exposed, and I had no problem either. So it was a pretty wonderful experience. You know, we had fire department, paramedics there, ambulance.
Everything prepared.
Everything was prepared, everything. So, but it was wonderful. It was a wonderful shoot. I'd photographed her before, and she has this. She's amazing, perfect. I can't explain it. You know, watching her get in there and not one single time saying anything about it. She's like, okay, right here, okay, good. And we put the bees down, and she just looked in the lens as they crawled around, and she would, like, you know, not even acknowledging it. Never saying anything about, oh, you know, bees, whatever, nothing. It was crazy. It was amazing, yeah.
This photo was a recreation, I think, of the original photo taken decades ago. How important is that for you as an artist?
So the original conversation I had with Angelina, she had seen that picture.
Yeah.
And that was a picture by Richard Avedon of a beekeeper called Ronald Fisher. Ronald's a friend of mine. I actually talked to him last week. He's still alive. And Richard Avedon was doing a series of photographs of the America West, and he put an ad in a beekeeping magazine, and Ronald Fisher answered the ad. So Angelina had seen that picture, and she said, I really would love to do something like this. Do you think this is possible? And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, this is like pretty scary. But I said, yeah, we can do that. And when I said earlier, you know, we were very careful not to make the picture shocking, but to try to make the picture beautiful. I feel like Avedon's version of that picture is very shocking. I remember seeing it for the first time and like recoiling from it, you know. And I think Angelina's more looks like jewelry, you know. It's really beautiful. And we're very careful to do that and not let it be too many bees and to have it be shocking. But Avedon's one of my favorite photographers.
Yeah.
He's passed away. And I like the idea of honoring that picture. And Ronald, the guy that's in the picture, loves the Angelina Jolie picture. Like, I became friends with him when we were doing the project. And like I said, I just talked to him last week. He's doing just fine.
Another experience when you're portraying characters of dramatic and cinematic works such as Breaking Bad, Stranger Things, or The Walking Dead. What factors did you consider?
Well, all of those are kind of dark, to say the least. And so it's kind of perfect for me because I love working in kind of a cinematic approach. And usually what I do is in all of those cases, you know, I watch the show, try to understand the characters, understand the show, understand their motivations, and shoot them. With Walking Dead, we shot them in character as their characters. With Stranger Things, pretty much as their characters. With Breaking Bad, not as much. It was more portrait work. Like, we did have him, Bryan Cranston, we had him wear the black hat, which was interesting because I was shooting portraits of him and I had the hat hidden in a box, and I shot a bunch of shots, and then I took the hat out of the box and I walked over and I set it down on the table. No talking. He looked at it and he put it on, and that was the shot, you know. So it was a really great collaboration.
Yeah.
And I think he really appreciated that we had gotten the original hat from the show and had it there on set.
The construction of the characters in this work, I mean Breaking Bad, was phenomenal. It's classified as one of the best in history of all time. Did you realize that at that time?
Yes. It was far enough into it where everyone knew this is something special.
Yes.
I mean, the acting in that show is like unbelievable.
Yeah.
And we knew that. And we knew with Stranger Things, and I knew with Walking Dead. You know, it was far enough into the show. Those weren't shot like right when the show started. The show had been around for multiple seasons
Yes.
by the time I was shooting this stuff. So we knew it was something special. We knew that it was affecting a lot of people. And so it would have been very different if I had the assignment and someone said like, oh, there's a new show called Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have had the weight, that it had when I shot those pictures.
Yeah. Is the inclusion of objects related to these works on your website, such as Jesse's plate car or Hawking's police badge or just a head, is it like a part of a larger project?
Yeah, I love that you saw that.
Yeah.
That's great. So I was doing that for a magazine, that piece, and it was a very large piece in the magazine. It was like 20 pages. And so I was talking to the photo director and trying to come up with like, what are we going to do here? So when we had already done Walking Dead. And when we did Walking Dead, we photographed a bunch of objects and objects like a police badge and things like that. And then we were talking and we said, well, let's do the same thing that we did for Walking Dead, where we shoot the people, but we also photograph all these props. And so we contacted the production and said ask the prop person, like, what can we get? And the prop person just showed up with all this stuff. And then we went through it and picked things that were significant. And we did the same thing with the same person. Those three actually were all three with Entertainment Weekly. Michelle Romero was the creative director on that. And we did it again with Stranger Things. It's like we got all these props. So we made for because the people that read that magazine are fans.
Yeah.
And so the fans want to see as much as they can. And so we wanted to make sure we created that for them. But yeah, it is a lot of fun to, Jesse's license plate and things like that, where it's a little bit absurd, but also, it's good for the fans.
Yeah, it means a lot for fans actually. What about Elon Musk and all the other projects in the world of space? What about them? How was the experience?
Well, I've spoken before about growing up in the 1960s when I was 7 years old when Apollo 11 landed on the moon for the first time, and I was just glued to the television. It was during the summer, so we were out of school, and I just sat there and watched TV, and I built models of the spaceships while it was happening. And my dad bought me models and paint, and I was in the living room of our house, like busy building models and watching the thing. So it was a big part of my life, and I think for kids in that time, it was such a expression of optimism, and it was so inspiring. And those men that did that were such cultural heroes, So I've always followed the space program and had a great passion for it. And then I first started shooting space-related material in 1998 when I was I started photographing the shuttle program. And I photographed that till 2011 when they canceled the program. And I was shooting launches and, all kinds of like processing things and stuff like that inside the shuttles. And then, a lot of the manufacturing then switched over to private sector. So Elon was a big player in that and still is. It was interesting photographing Elon because I had a half hour. I shoot very fast. So I'll get it ready and then the person comes in and I'll start shooting right away. And I think I shot him for about 15 minutes or something, and then just started talking about space travel because I wanted to ask him all these questions, and I was asking him, and he was great. He was answering all the questions, and it was really, really kind of fascinating. But, he's kind of a modern day sort of like Rockefeller or Westinghouse, a big titan of industry. And, he's created this unbelievable industry of reusable rocket systems and things that NASA never did in the whole history of NASA. Well, the shuttle was reusable partially. The orbiter itself came back, but the rockets and stuff fell into the ocean. And some of them were actually picked up and reused. But that topic is so rich with images. It's so beautiful to look at. on many levels. You know, launches are incredible, but also the spacesuits and gloves and the places that this all takes place. You know, they're incredibly visual. And as a photographer, you know, photographers, we need something to point our camera at. Right? Like subject is everything, right? We're not like an illustrator where we go into our studio and we just create something. We need to have something in front of us, which is one of the great joys of photography, because I remember early on when I made the commitment to myself that I was going to be a photographer. It wasn't an option, period. I'm going to be a photographer. And I worked very, very hard to get to that point. But partially, I think the desire was that it would allow for experiences, travel, seeing things that I never would see, seeing things that most people never will see.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it for me, you know, and I work for National Geographic now for many years, and you know, I never when I was a boy would I have imagined that I would be the one taking the picture.
Has the advent of social media and the public's preference for content over context made it like challenging to appreciate art and fine arts?
That's a really good question. For many years, photography had a technical barrier that people couldn't get through unless you worked hard, right? You had to understand film, you had to understand chemistry. All these things were things that a photographer needed to know in order to do his job. And with digital photography, and I mean even just iPhone photography, it's gotten so easy to actually make an image. But all you get really with a digital camera, in my opinion, is you get a picture that's properly exposed and in focus. Other than that, it's still image making. You still need to create a compelling image. So I feel a lot of, I don't want to say safety, but I feel a lot of confidence because I know I've studied and worked very, very hard at trying to make compelling images. And so I feel that social media has, in some ways, I want to say dumbed down, but I think of another way to say it. You know, it's diminished the impact of imagery because there's a very amateur nature to a lot of it. And so the expectation is lowered. Yeah. So historically, the way we would digest a photograph or an image would be usually through print, right? Through a magazine. And you'd get a magazine, and the best people in the world were the ones making those pictures. Yes. So those pictures were going to be special every time. And that's not the case anymore. Like anybody can do it, right? Yes. Anybody's doing it. So the specialness, I think, of imagery. But I think the truth is, the special images now are the ones that come to the top. They're the ones that stand out. So no, as I think, you know, I think social media is moving more toward video than it is still images as well. I mean, if I think about Instagram 2 years ago, Instagram periodically would have a video. And now when I go to my Instagram feed, it's just videos. The whole thing's videos. So it used to be a still platform.
Yes.
And it's not as much anymore a still platform. So I don't know. You know, I know there's a lot of pressure put on photographers, myself included, by publications to create video content when we're creating still content. In fact, I think one of the mandates at National Geographic now is that the video content of an assignment is as important as the still content of an assignment. That's hard to believe, really, coming from a publication that for 120 years has only done still content, you know. Yeah. But it's, you know, it's the way people digest media, you know. It's a very quick swipe, 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 moving, swipe. Yeah, so it's interesting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dan Winters. It's a pleasure to have you here in Sharjah, and it's an honor to have you here in our show. Thank you so much.
It's a true honor to be here. I've had the best time, and the people I've met have been wonderful. So thank you for having me. I really mean that.
شكرا لكم مشاهدينا على متابعة هذه الحلقة. إلى اللقاء.